Hi, Dr. P here, and I'm going to read and comment on some quotations from a couple of well-known practitioners of what we might call realpolitik, Machiavelli and Henry Kissinger. Machiavelli wrote The Prince as a set of advice to his patron at the time, and that has been a major influence on international strategy and behavior for centuries. He wrote that in Renaissance times. Henry Kissinger, who was a professor, became National Security Advisor and later Secretary of State, and the main influence on Republican foreign policy in the late 60s and early 70s, including Vietnam. So first we have some from Machiavelli. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. And my comment is that you might think of our recent president and all the losers that he shed as he went along. Another quotation, it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. And you can argue about that, but that was Machiavelli's view. Another, if an injury has to be done to a man, it should be so severe that his vengeance need not be feared. Now this immediately made me think of Alan Calamer's point of view. Alan Calamer designed the game diplomacy, which of course is the epitome of realpolitik, I suppose you could say. In his view, if you're going to stab, that is betray someone in the game, make sure they won't be in any condition to exact vengeance. This is forgotten by many diplomacy players who only look at the short-term gains rather than the long-term. Another quote, where the willingness is great, the difficulties cannot, in other words, will not be great, which is very much in the line of those who emphasize morale. Another quote, the promise given was a necessity of the past, the word broken is a necessity of the present. And again, very much in the spirit of the cutthroat way of playing diplomacy and of realpolitik in general. Another, there is no avoiding war. It can only be postponed to the advantage of others. Well, this is not a modern viewpoint, but you have to remember that wars were incessant in Machiavelli's time, and often they were fought by mercenaries, so you didn't have to worry so much about your own population being injured. Not that many of the rulers cared about their population anyway. This is Italy. Another, he who wishes to be obeyed must know how to command. And my comment is, command, not bully. Another, men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few really know what you are. And that addresses the question of perception versus reality. It's the perception that most people see, not necessarily the reality. Another quote, never was anything great achieved without danger. A fairly obvious one, I think. Another, one who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived. Which made me think of the old phrase, there's a sucker born every minute. And certainly there are a great many people who are easily deceived these days. The grasp on reality is less than it used to be. Then we have some classic Henry Kissinger quotes, some of which perhaps I've just put in because they're interesting rather than because they have a lot to do with negotiations. The illegal we do immediately. The unconstitutional takes a little longer. The absence of alternatives clears the mind marvelously. Now that made me think that good strategy and objective is to maintain freedom of action. But of course, when you only have one thing you can do, you don't have freedom of action. And that's not always going to be good. Another quote, the task of the leader is to get his people from where they are to where they have not been. And I've emphasized have not been, because that can be very difficult. People are often very conservative. Another quote, "The nice thing about being a celebrity is that if you bore people, they think it's their fault." That's one of those that really doesn't have anything to do with negotiations specifically. Another, "Nobody will ever win the battle of the sexes. There's just too much fraternizing with the enemy." Then we get back to more serious ones. "Each success only buys an admission ticket to a more difficult problem." "Blessed are the people whose leaders can look destiny in the eye without flinching, but also without attempting to play God." You have to think about that one a bit. Then another from his personal experience, "University politics are vicious precisely because the stakes are so small." And sometimes you can say that about international diplomacy, really small stakes but a lot of viciousness. Another quote, "Any fact that needs to be disclosed should be put out now or as quickly as possible, because otherwise the bleeding will not end." And the last one is, "The conventional army loses if it does not win. The guerrilla wins if he does not lose." And I'll have some more quotes from other people in another video. Thanks for listening.